ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and 7 p.m. in Lagos. Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM and online at wadr.org. First, our top stories. Senegal's National Union of Autonomous of Senegal begins 24 hours nationwide strike. Nigeria's President Tinubu urges to sustain the military offensive against terrorists as he meets security chiefs.
If the tempo is kept, I'm sure that this thing will come to an end. These are just ragtag people.
Ghana's complete day one of national cleanup exercise as authorities steps up post-flood recovery.
Today one is so effective than as it used to happen. There should be more enforcement. President doesn't stay here. We are staying here, and we are the cause of all this.
At least once a month, let's set aside one day, and all of us come out and clean the city.
And Liberian rights groups to stage protest July 17 over cocaine probe and governance. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. We'll begin here in Senegal as tensions between the government and labor unions continue to escalate. A 24-hour nationwide strike is underway after the latest round of negotiations between the government and workers' representatives ended without an agreement. The strike called by the Labour Union Front for the Defence of Workers follows unsuccessful talks with the Minister of Civil Service and Labour over a range of long-standing demands, including improved working conditions, salary adjustments, and the implementation of previous agreements. Several key sectors have been affected by the industrial action, disrupting public services and highlighting the growing frustration among workers. Demba Ma'an filed this report and voiced by Gosin Koli.
Despite Thursday's discussion with the Minister of Public Service, union members maintained their strike call. The National Autonomous Trade Unions of Senegal called for a nationwide shutdown of several public and private sectors. They intend to maintain pressure on the government to obtain satisfaction on their main demands. Ousmane Diallo is first Deputy Secretary General of the National Confederation of Workers of Senegal.
The Union Front has submitted its list of demands, which covers all sectors. Many issues remain unresolved, which is why the warning general strike will begin today. This general strike is supported by certain points that are fundamental to the union federations, namely the Labour Code and the Social Security Code.
For its part, the government affirms that it is continuing the social dialogue with the trade unions. Authorities indicate that a strike notice must be filed before any action. Mamadou Lamine Janté is the Senegalese Minister of Public Service.
In both the public and private sectors, a union federation cannot file a strike notice to incite people to strike. Civil servants who are members of unions file a strike notice simultaneously for the same reason. The Director General of the Civil Service is here. He has not received any such notice.
This day of mobilization constitutes a new test for social dialogue in Senegal. If no compromise is reached in the coming days, the trade unions do not rule out escalating their movement to force the government to respond to their demands.
Demba Ma'an filed that report and voiced by Gosin Koli. Elsewhere, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu on Thursday held a strategic meeting with security chiefs at the presidential villa in Abuja to review the security situation across the country. The Minister of Defense, Christopher Musa, and the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, led other service chiefs to the meeting. Each agency had briefs Tinubu, Nigeria's Commander-in-Chief, on the ongoing efforts and strategies aimed at tackling insecurity in different parts of the nation. Yechinus Hasichu completes the story.
The closed-door meeting focused on the country's security situation, ongoing military operations, and strategies to consolidate recent gains against terrorist and criminal groups. Although details of the deliberations were not made public, the meeting comes at a time when security forces have intensified operations across northeast, northwest, and north-central regions. Reacting to the security situation, Senator Ali Ndume said insecurity remains one of Nigeria's biggest challenges and called for more decisive action to protect lives and property.
The issue of insecurity is our greatest concern in this country now. It used to be in the northeast alone. It went to south and north central northwest, and even now southwest. We had a residual issue of insecurity with IPOPs in the northeast and then the southeast.
The meeting also comes days after the military announced the rescue of abductees, the surrender of suspected ISWAP fighters, and the arrest of terrorist collaborators during operations in the northeast. Ndume, however, urged the president and the military to sustain the ongoing offensive, warning against allowing terrorist groups the opportunity to regroup.
A lot of pressure on the bandits in the southeast and northeast. They have even taken out some of their leaders. And even yesterday, some of their commanders have surrendered. So if the tempo is kept, I'm sure that this thing will come to an end. These are just ragtag people that cannot stand up to the military, even in number or like that.
Security analysts say while recent military gains are encouraging, maintaining pressure on criminal groups, improving intelligence gathering, and strengthening coordination among security agencies will be critical to restoring lasting peace. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
In the meantime, the first day of Ghana's two-day nationwide cleanup exercise has ended with coordinated sanitation activities across 7 flood-affected regions as authorities intensify efforts to prevent a repeat of the deadly floods that struck the country late last month. The day's activities also saw President John Dramani Mahama propose making the nationwide cleanup a monthly exercise to encourage sustained public participation. Nadi Tete in Accra completes the story.
Friday's activities were focused on institutions, government agencies and organized groups, while the general public is expected to join tomorrow, Saturday, for community-wide cleanup exercises. Across the country, the priority is clearing choked drains, removing refuse and desilting waterways ahead of the peak of the rainy season. In the Greater Accra region, teams were deployed to flood-prone communities, including Alajo, Kanishi and the Odo Basin, where drains clogged with silt and plastic waste have repeatedly contributed to flooding. Residents commended the move. Here's one.
Today one is so effective than as it used to happen. There's more enforcement. President doesn't stay here. We are staying here, and we are the cause of all this. Not any member. We are the community that with the flood cause. They are the main cause of it. Because looking at the gutter, you look at the nature of the gutter. It's very bad.
In the central region, assemblies and residents also mobilized to clear drains and public spaces in flood-prone communities, with officials urging residents to keep waterways free from refuse to minimize future flooding. Ekopenyi Otre Eduamwa is a central regional minister, and he called on the clergy to also lead the campaign. Inspecting the exercise in Accra, President John Dramani Mahama, who commended Ghanaians for their participation, proposed making the initiative a monthly national event.
And so this will be a continuous exercise. And at least once a month, let's set aside one day and all of us come out and clean the city. And with the help of the waste management companies, we'll be able to keep this city clean and also free of flooding. So thank you everybody who came for this exercise.
Government says the cleanup exercise forms part of a broader post-flood recovery plan that includes dredging major drains, improving drainage infrastructure, and strengthening flood preparedness across the country. For WADR, Nadi Tete, Accra.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In the central Sahel region of Mali, the army says it has regained control of the northern town of Anadif after days of intense fighting with Tuareg separatists and jihadist fighters. Military sources say Malian forces, supported by Russian Africa Corps personnel, recaptured the town following the arrival of reinforcements on Thursday evening. Details with Deborah Muo.
Located about 100 kilometers from Kidal, Anafis had been claimed by the Tuareg Azawad Liberation Front and the Al-Qaeda-linked group for the support of Islam and Muslims JINIM after they launched coordinated attacks across northern and central Mali last weekend. According to military sources, Russian personnel and Malian soldiers who had remained inside a military camp within the town continued resisting until reinforcements arrived and restored government control. Earlier this week, Malian authorities also received military equipment for the country's northern regions as they seek to reinforce security amid a wave of attacks. The latest fighting follows a major offensive at the end of April when the FLA and JINIM coalition recaptured the strategic city of Kidal, dealing a significant setback to the central government. Mali has faced a worsening security crisis since 2012, driven by attacks from armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State, as well as Tuareg separatist movements and criminal networks. The conflict has also deepened the country's economic challenges.
Deborah Moore filed that report in the Gambia. Former Executive Secretary of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, Babagale Jallow, is urging President Adama Barrow not to seek a third term in office. He argues that such a move would undermine the country's democratic aspirations and transitional justice process. In an opinion article titled "The Truth, Nothing But the Truth," Jallow says a third term bid would break past promises on presidential term limits and could threaten the Gambia's long-term peace and political stability. His comments come amid growing debate over whether President Barrow will contest the 2026 presidential election. WDL spoke with the former Executive Secretary of the Gambia's TRRC.
If a government overstays in power, there is a likelihood in the long run of a military takeover of the government. Military intervention is exactly what happened with Jawara. We saw it. Now, Jammeh, there had been many attempts, as you know, to take over from him violently. Attempted coups happened several times during the Jammeh regime. And I don't see any reason why Adama Barrow's regime would be an exception to this rule.
Given your former role at the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, what specific aspects of the TRRC legacy do you believe are most at risk if the current political trajectory continues?
Well, the transitional justice process in the Gambia is bigger than the TRRC. We had the Constitutional Review Commission, as you know, and the Constitutional Review Commission came up with a draft constitution that was submitted to the government in 2020. But that draft constitution, however good it was nullified because it contained a provision on term limits. There is no denying that fact. And the argument of the government was that the term limit provision there was not to the advantage of President Barrow. And therefore, for some reason, they were able to kill it. That is an aspect of the transitional justice process that points directly to this issue of term limits. Too, for me, and for many like me who think of this issue, is that President Barrow has served for 2 5-year terms, that he should step down and allow, the country to move forward.
Former Executive Secretary of the Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, Dr. Babagale Jallow, speaking there. Now, civil rights groups in Liberia are preparing for a major street protest on July 17, calling for greater accountability over the seizure of the $19 million worth of cocaine and wider governance issues. The planned demonstration is being organized by the advocacy group Solidarity and Trust for a New Day, or STAND, under the theme No to Drugs. It comes amid growing public debate over the government's handling of the high-profile drug investigation and increasing calls for transparency and accountability. WDL's Moon River correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Organizers say, besides the cocaine investigation, the protests will also focus on the rising cost of living, unemployment, corruption, insecurity, and the decline in public confidence in state institutions. The Solidarity and Trust for a New Day stand notified the Ministry of Justice of the July 17 protest and calls on the government to facilitate a peaceful demonstration. It is urging the president to establish an independent and credible investigative mechanism to identify and prosecute everyone connected to the cocaine case, regardless of their position or influence. Moluba Molu is STAN's chairman.
Very common, Mr. Kofi Wu, head of the Ramos International Airport, the head of the National Port Authority, officer in charge of the DEA, who is said allegedly to be a very close friend to Mr. Komo, to step aside or should be suspended by the president. We want to ensure that Liberia is not a transit point for drug smuggling.
The planned demonstration is also receiving support from the campus-based Student Unification Party, which says the protest represents a peaceful constitutional effort to demand transparency, accountability, and responsible leadership. Odysseus Moba explains the group's position.
The current socio-economic landscape in Liberia is marked by an escalating governance crisis in which economic paralysis and the naked assault against the rule of law have taken over the society. The Bakakun administration has abandoned its constitutional mandate and keeping the people pinned down in the cesspit of systemic poverty and structural neglect.
Meanwhile, the Liberian government has maintained that investigations into the cocaine seizure remain ongoing and assured the public that all those responsible will be prosecuted. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar and around the world on WADR.org. Here is a reminder of our top stories. The National Autonomous Unions of Senegal begins 24 hours nationwide strike. Nigeria's President Tinubu urged to sustain military offensive against terrorists as amid security chiefs. Ghana completes day one of national cleanup exercise as authorities steps up post-flood recovery. And Liberian rights groups to stage protest July 17 over cocaine probe and governance. Still ahead, we do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Bringing you the facts beyond the headlines from Monrovia, Liberia. This is Abraham Parker. Stay tuned to WADR 94.9 FM Dakar.
Don't forget, you can follow live streaming on WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. In Burkina Faso, a major shift is underway in the country's mining sector. The transitional government has approved the industrial exploitation of the Bubulu gold mine by the state-owned mining company Sopamib. According to the authorities, Sopamib Bubulu SA will have a production capacity of 7.27 tons of gold over a 15-year lifespan. The decision was announced on Thursday during a cabinet meeting. Usman Mar completes the story.
Bubulu SR is the first mining company wholly owned by the Burkinabe state. Based in Yako in the Pasori province, it aims to extract nearly 11 million tons of ore. According to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Quarries, Yakubu Zabre Kuba, this project embodies a new direction in the country's mining policy.
Today we are witnessing not just a mining project, but a powerful symbol for us, reflecting the current vision of the government. A revolution is underway in Burkina Faso's mining sector, and we will remember that this is the first industrial mining entirely built by and for the benefit of the states.
Bubulu SR aims to produce 7.27 tons of gold over an estimated lifespan of 15 years. Its direct contribution to the state budget is estimated at 34.5 billion CFA francs, with the creation of 1,200 direct jobs.
And that's more than 12,300 meters of drilling completed, more about 500 samples that have been analyzed. It marks the end of a hiatus of more than 25 years and the beginning of a genuine sovereignty for the benefit of the states.
Before the creation of this new mining company, the Burkinabe state received partial dividends from certain mining companies, including the Bungu mine in the east. As of the end of September 2025, the country had 13 industrial mines, including 7 semi-mechanized mines, 34 quarries in production, and more than 800 artisanal mining sites.
Usman Mra with the details of that report filed in by Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
Well, the guest interview focuses on the Gambia, a country preparing for generational elections this December. Although current President Adama Barrow has not formally announced his intention for a third term, there are signals that he could recontest the presidency. However, some political analysts, including civil society groups and governance experts, argue that such a move would undermine the country's democratic aspirations and transitional justice process. Our guest is Baba Gale Jallo, former executive secretary of the Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, who urges President Barrow not to seek a third term in office.
There was a provision in the 1996 draft constitution that Jammeh accepted but then removed from the issue, from the constitution, on term limits. There was the National Consultative Committee that went around the country and sought people's opinions on how long the Jammeh regime should stay. And one of the recommendations of that committee was, that there should be a term limit of 2 5-year terms for the president. Now, that recommendation was accepted by Jammeh, but then he removed it from the draft, which is now the 1997 Constitution. And we had this issue all along. The struggle against Jammeh was particularly focused on the issue of self-entrenchment in power. And the coalition that took over from Jammeh that came around Adama Barrow and won the elections in December 2016 had this issue at the core of their mandate. So I believe that in spite of the legal right to run, that Adama Barrow owes it to the Gambian people and to the Gambian nation to not do so, because he doesn't have the moral authority to hijack the hopes and aspirations of the Gambian people and the need for a term limit in the Constitution. And I've made this argument before, is that if you overstay in power, anything can happen.
You warned that authoritarian bait could threaten the country's long-term peace and stability. But what concrete warning signs are you already seeing that support this concern of yours?
Well, the instability that I foresee need not necessarily happen immediately after the elections. Well, what I'm saying, and I've said this before in other articles on this same issue, is that if a government overstays in power, there is a likelihood in the long run of a military takeover of the government, military intervention. That's exactly what happened with Jawara. Now, Jammeh, there had been many, many attempts, as you know, to take over from him violently. Attempted coups happened several times during the Jammeh regime. And I don't see any reason why Adama Barrow's regime would be an exception to this rule.
In your write-up or your article, you suggest that President Barrow's decision to seek another term undermines the spirit of the country's transitional justice process. Given your former role at the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, what specific aspects of the TRRC legacy do you believe are most at risk if the current political trajectory continues?
Well, the transitional justice process in the Gambia is bigger than the TRRC. We had the Constitutional Review Commission, as you know, and the Constitutional Review Commission came up with a draft constitution that was submitted to the government in 2020. But that draft constitution, however good it was nullified because it contained a provision on term limits. There is no denying that fact. And the argument of the government was that the term limit provision there was not to the advantage of President Barrow. And therefore, for some reason, they were able to kill it. That is an aspect of the transitional justice process that points directly to this issue of term limits. So for me, and for many like me who think of this issue, is that President Barrow has served for 2 5-year terms, that he should step down and allow the country to move forward.
Former Executive Secretary of the Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, Dr. Baba Gale Jallo, speaking there. And in sport news, Morocco national football team said they had hoped to progress past the World Cup quarterfinals but had to accept their loss to a better team as France eliminated them 2-0. Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembele scored second-half goals to secure the victory, advancing France to their third consecutive World Cup semi-final. Coach Mohamed Wabi said his side had still left a good image despite a laboured performance as they lost to France for a second successive tournament. Morocco will co-host the next World Cup with Spain and Portugal in 2030. But for now, France advances to the semi-finals to face the winner of the Spain versus Belgium quarterfinal match today at 7 p.m. Meanwhile, as the FIFA World Cup enters its decisive stages, football analyst Paul Lyon believes Africa's performances have exposed lessons that extend far beyond the pitch. While the continent once again showcased its abundance of talent and passion, the tournament has also highlighted the need for stronger football administration, better long-term planning, improved youth development, and more tactical innovation. Young argues that if African football federations and coaches are to consistently compete with the world's elite, they must embrace the standards demonstrated by the tournament's top-performing nations and invest in sustainable football structures rather than relying solely on individual brilliance.
Yes, because if you have 10 teams, participating in the tournament, then out of the 10, 9 made it to the next round, the knockout phase, then it means that the nation, the countries in Africa are actually very, very good, and football is actually evolving. So I think it's a very, very welcome development. Well, I wouldn't say 100% because we trusted, we expected more from Morocco, since if they went to the World Cup and they got to the semi-finals in the last World Cup, we expected them to get to the final this time. So they were not able to even get to the semi-final like the last World Cup. So yeah, it's a bit of a disappointment, but overall, I think Africa has done very well.
Bolitiong is a football analyst. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudaju for the technical assistance. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms, including X, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, including LinkedIn at WADR English. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a repeat broadcast of our opinion poll series, It's You Speaking. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.